All right. Well, uh, I guess you have to welcome to the last installment of the creative writing and mental health workshop series. Um, Started this since May 6th. And over the course of the week, kind of just like gone through different sets of activities and stuff. Since May is kind of National Mental Health Awareness Month, I wanted to do something that was connected to like creative writing because there are benefits that have been found uh, with using writing as an expressive tool uh, as a way to improve mental health. One of the other reasons why I wanted to put this workshop together, of course, is to remind us that we are not alone in whatever it is that we're facing. The world is such a crappy place these days. And even if there really aren't like much opportunities for hope, because I have a interesting relationship with the word hope, but at least something that's like close to hope we can find during these times. One of the quotes that I think about often is something that James Baldwin wrote, and he said, "You think your pain and your heartbreak are unprecedented in the history of the world, but then you read it was Dostoevsky and Dickens who taught me that the things that tormented me most were the very things that connected me with all the people who were alive or who ever had been alive. Only if we face these open wounds in ourselves can we understand them in other people." Um, Main important part of that quote for me is, "But then you read," which means other people, sort of like gone through um, some of the things that we are going through. Might not be exactly the same, but something maybe similar. And like I said earlier, studies have shown there are some benefits to expressive writing, especially as it pertains to mental well-being. So, um, just to kind of go through a little bit, I'll share my screen. Okay. So, first week we kind of went through why we wanted to take this workshop in the first place. What brings us here? What are we looking forward to? What do we want to accomplish and all of that? And we looked at a poem by Ebony Stewart called Mental Health Bars. Uh, and after that, using something that Ebony had said in the poem, we kind of made a list of unhelpful things that people have said during moments we've expressed being overwhelmed, and afterwards we sort of deleted or tore the list. Um, and then after that, we discussed the poem, and another prompt that we did was to write a letter addressed to the self, as if the statement from Ebony's poem, Ebony Stewart's poem, Mental Health Bars were true, which is, "Can't nobody steal my joy, can't nobody steal my joy, not even myself." And what would a letter addressed to the self, look like if the statement was true? Uh, the following week, we talked about anxiety primarily using texts, like a poem by Christopher Diaz and Anna Christina that kind of talks about anxiety. And another text by Wei Jun Wang that is an essay that looks at anxiety at a different, from different perspectives, different types of anxiety, and how those could be defined in some ways. Um, and using the poem, we kind of thought about what stigma looks like, for example, what some of the taboo things about, talking about mental health might look like. In the poem, Beard said something about, um, the truth is, some days my anxiety is something that I can manage, which feels like a taboo thing to like confess, especially if you're trying to raise awareness about mental health. You know, uh, the typical route to go would be to say, "Oh, it's such a terrible thing, I can't function." But there are also truths to the fact that yeah, maybe there are uh, some moments when it's not as difficult as 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 it might be painted. So, but thinking about that, we decided to write about some of the things that we think we're not supposed to talk about as it relates to our mental health. And we use that opportunity to kind of be honest with ourselves about what that experience looks like. And another prompt was to write a set, a list of instructions for a particular fear of worry, in line with thinking about the short story, the flash fiction piece by Ruth Bradshaw called Instructions for Overcoming the Fear of Darkness, in which she highlights different ages where when I say she, the character in the story highlights different ages of their experience with a particular fear, uh, which is the fear of darkness. And so, whatever fear or whatever worry might be specific to each person, what would a set or a list of instructions look like for overcoming that particular fear or worry? And last week, we started it off with a meditation exercise uh, using compassion training by Lisa Jiku as a guide, in which we start off thinking about, using a set of affirmations, using a set of words. Uh, we start off thinking, about what it means to wish someone well, starting with yourself. May I be well, may I be healthy, may I be happy. Uh, to think about what that means to say that repeatedly to yourself. And also to extend that to somebody you care about, to somebody you love, and to someone that you might feel, uncertain about. You have a sort of neutral relationship. You don't so much care about them. And lastly, to somebody you can't stand, we might go as far as to say to somebody you hate, right? Or somebody you have a complicated relationship with. What would it look like to extend the same, courtesy or the same feeling of like well wishes, right, to that person? So we kind of go through that exercise, and then we look at mental texts like poems primarily for this for last week. A poem by Yesenia Montia called A Brief Meditation on Breath, a poem by K.B. Brookins titled Good Grief, and a poem by James Cruz titled Self Compassion. And in these poems specifically, we are trying to think about what it means, right? Uh, to think about mental health, in a scope that affects not just the personal, but like the sort of big issues that we are experiencing, in the world as human beings. So, a brief meditation on breath, for instance, tackles the pandemic, right? But also police brutality and how those things are in conjunction with one another. Good grief tackles primarily a sort of ecological disaster, in particular, the winter freeze that happened in Texas. Was it last year or 2 years ago now?
Last February.
Yeah, last February. So, uh, yeah, so we looked at that, and self compassion more so connected to the pandemic as well, which is sort of global and but also like national in some cases. But sort of those like how those big things affect our mental health. And if I was teaching this particular group of text this week, I certainly would have included something about the recent shooting that happened, because that also affects our mental health, or at least for some people it does. So all those big things that sort of kind of loom, over us, that are beyond our individual abilities to kind of like tackle, but they still like have an effect on us as people. Sort of, how do you kind of go through those things? Um, and we use prompts like are thinking about when the last time was that we took in the sweetness in, and diaphragm, expanding into sound using a quote from Montia's poem. Um, and another prompt was to start a poem. And I say poem, you could go the route of an essay, you could go the route of a story. Um, if I breathe right, I can. Taking that from Montia's poem as the title of the first line. And then the third prompt, using James Crue's poem Self Compassion as a guide. We're thinking about what it means to address oneself with a pet name, and to write a love poem, or a note of compassion, a note of kindness to oneself. Uh, and this is because in the poem, there's this yoga instructor that calls himself, Honey, that addresses himself as Honey. And, the poem begins with the speaker kind of recalling that and laughing at the instructor. But towards the end of the poem, there is sort of like a change that happens where the speaker, addresses himself, in this tender way, considering all the facts of the world, right? The husband, for instance, being sick, uh, pipes that are leaky and need to be fixed, the pandemic sort of happening in the background, all these facts, but to still go, oh, honey, right, to oneself, or whatever pet name you want to address yourself with, and to write a note of compassion to himself, while keeping in mind all those facts. It's pretty important. For today, we are going to start off thinking about something about being alive that you think there ought to be a word for, but there isn't. Right? What is something about the experience of being alive that you just think, sort of like those like tiny moments that happens, maybe between friends, maybe between family members, or maybe perhaps even like between strangers. I think, you know, for me, as an example, it would be sort of like, I don't know if you've experienced this, uh, where you're kind of like maybe sitting on a bus, or like uh, sitting in a public place, and your arm sort of grazes like somebody that you don't know, right? And it takes like few seconds, right? It doesn't take long. But and then like you both are conscious of the fact that like your elbows just touched, right? And you sort of just like move on with your life. There's like literally no name for that kind of interaction. And I would like for there to be a name for it, but there just isn't, right? But I think about that like often. Like that's sort of like, because you might say, oh, excuse me, right? Or sometimes you don't even acknowledge it, right? It just happens, and you're like, oh, our arms just grazed, and you just kind of move on with your life. But for me, I think about those kind of moments. So if you want to take a few minutes and free write about that, something about being alive that you think there ought to be a word for, but there just isn't. And if you want to be daring, you might even want to try and like make up a word for that experience. I'll stop sharing my screen for a second and I will put the in the chat. What is something about being alive that you think there ought to be a word for, but there isn't? Uh, ooh. Oh, wow, that is good. So, there should be a specific name for the exhale at the end of the day after you've accomplished everything. Wow, yeah, I agree. Yeah. You know what that sort of like reminded me of too is the feeling that people have said, like of like taking off your bra at the end of the day, after a long day or whatever, like that feeling too, like there actually isn't, is there a name for it? Yeah, 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 yeah. Like it's like in the same family of like feelings of like I am done for the day, and I'm taking off. People say I'm taking off the day, or even before you step into a bath, it's like I'm taking off the day from me. Yeah, that feeling. Hmm. Yeah, you gotta do it the next day. You gotta do it the next day. But it's like a for now, at least I'm done for the day. Yeah, that's a good one. Okay. What I'll do now, and I'll post the link to this one if you wanna follow along. Post a link to the poem in here. But I will play it on here, or actually I'll just read it instead. Uh, Initially, I was gonna play it for the audio as it is read by the author. I will just share my screen. Okay, perfect. So this is a poem by Gabriel Calvaco-Resi called Hammond B3 Organs Listen. And I do want to make a content warning in that it talks about suicidal ideation. So just a heads up. Uh, the days I don't want to kill myself are extraordinary, deep bass. All the people in the streets waiting for their high fives and leaping when they see me. I am the sun filled God of love, or at least an optimistic undersecretary. There should be a word for it. The days you wake up and do not want to slit your throat. Money in the bank, enough for an iced green tea every weekday and Saturday and Sunday. It's like being in the armpit of a Hammond B3 organ. just reeks of gratitude and funk, the funk of ages. I'm not going to ruin my love's life today. It's like the time I said yes to gray sneakers, but then the salesman said, wait. And there, out of the back room, like the bakery's first biscuits, bright blue kicks, iridescent, like a scarab. Oh, who am I kidding? It was nothing like a scarab. It was like bright blue fucking sneakers. I did not want to die that day. Oh my God. Why don't we talk about it? How good it feels. And if you don't know, then you're lucky. But also, you poor thing. Bring the band out on the stoop. Let the whole neighborhood hear. Come on, everybody. Say it with me nice and slow. No pills, no cliff, no brains on the floor, bring the bass back. No rope, no hose, not today, Satan. Every day I wake up with my good fortune and news of my demise. Don't keep it from me. Why don't we have a name for it? Bring the bass back. Bring the band out on the stoop. Hallelujah. I love this poem so much. So much. Uh, but yeah, uh, there should be a word for it, the days you wake up and do not want to slit your throat, the days you wake up and do not want to kill yourself. Um, not many people, well, I shouldn't say not many people. There are people who might not know what that feels like. For, but for those of us, uh, like the speaker who know what that feels like. It's like um, it's like the speaker says, right? How lucky you are, but also you poor thing, um, because it just makes you aware of like life so much. When you have that kind of feeling of like not wanting to be here every now and then, it just makes you aware of how much life there is. Still. Uh, what I want us to do next is to write a list of at least 25 things you're grateful for. And this could be during the past week, during the past month or year. Um, and this doesn't have to be anything fancy, just a list. Uh, just a list. Write a list, and I'm gonna put this in the chat as well. Write a list of at least 25 things that you're grateful for during the past week, month, or year. Or if that's difficult, you can also add uh, over the course of your lifetime. You're like, oh, I don't think I have 25 things that I'm grateful for in the past year. Maybe over the course of your lifetime, if you can think of. It's like a few minutes to do that. Okay. All right. We are going to look at another poem uh, by Ocean. This one by Ocean Vuong, and it's called "Reasons for Staying." Would you mind? Would you mind reading it? Sure. I'll share my screen here.
Reasons for Staying by Ocean Vuong. The October leaves coming down as if called. Morning fog through the wild ride beyond the train tracks. A cigarette, a good sweater. On the sagging porch while the family sleeps, that I woke at all and the hawk up there thought nothing of its wings. That I snuck onto the page while the guards were shit-faced on codeine. That I read my books by the light of riot fire. That my best words came farthest from myself, and it's awesome. That you can blow a man and your voice speaks through his voice, like Jonah through the whale, because a blade of brown rye multiplied by thousands makes a purple field. Because this mess I made with love, because they came into my life, my brothers, like something poured, because crying, believe it or not, did wonders, because my uncle never killed himself, but simply died on purpose, because I made a promise that the McDonald's arch glimpse from the 2 a.m. rehab window was enough. The mercy is small, but the earth is smaller. Summer rain hitting Pete's bare shoulders. Because I stopped apologizing myself toward visibility. Because the body is my last address. The moment just before morning, like right now when it's blood blue and terror incumbent. Because the sound of bike spokes heading home at dawn is unbearable. Because the hills keep burning in California through red smoke singing, through the singing and exit, because only music rhymes with music. The words I've yet to use, Timothy Grass, Jeffrey Pine, Celine, Cocksure, Light Lusty, Midnight Green, Gentled, Water Thin, Lord as a verb, Russet, Pooter, Lobotomy, the night's worth of dust on his upper lip, barn joy on the cusp of winter, the broken piano under a bridge in Windsor that sounds like footsteps when you play it, the Sharpie sign outside the foreclosed house, seeking push mower, please call Kayla. The train whistle heard through an open window after a nightmare, sleeping in the back seat, leaving the town that broke me intact. Early snow falling from a clear blush sky, as if called.
As if called. Thank you so much for reading that. Beautiful reading. So yeah, reasons for staying. Uh, and one of the things about this poem, for me at least, is that these are reasons that are very, very particular to the speaker, right, to the writer. And the incredible thing, I think, is that, every person is going to have their reasons, and some of those things might overlap with someone else's experience, but for sure, each person is going to have their individual reasons. And if you think about the list of things you're grateful for that I asked you to make earlier, you can certainly like draw inspiration from that to think about what your own reasons might be. Another poem to look at, kind of in line with that, especially because we're living through it right now, is Reasons to Live Through the Apocalypse by Nikita Gill. Reasons to Live Through the Apocalypse. And a poem by Nikita Gill. Sun rises, people who have still to meet and laugh with, songs about love, peace, anger, and revolution, walks in the woods, the smile you exchange with a stranger when you experience beauty accidentally together, butterflies, seeing your grandparents again, the moon in all her forms, whether half or full, dogs, birthdays and half birthdays, that feeling of floating in love, watching birds eat from bird feeders, the waves of happiness that follow the end of sadness, brown eyes, watching a boat cross an empty sea, sunsets, dipping your feet in a river, balconies, cake, the wind in your face when you roll the car window down on an open highway, falling asleep to the sound of a steady heartbeat, warm cups of tea on cold days, hugs, night skies, art museums, books filled with everything you do not yet know, long conversations, long lost friends, poetry, right? Uh, Again, sort of another list, the poems you're looking at, are sort of list poems. When you think about list poems, it doesn't necessarily have to, be like bullet points or like numbered, but this is certainly like in the tradition or like the genre of what we would categorize as a list poems. And the the beautiful thing about these sort of poems is that it's endless in a way, right? There's no limit, right? It can be as short as you want it to be, or it could just keep on going forever. So again, thinking about the prompts from earlier, writing at least 25 things you're grateful for during the past week, month, or year. Uh, that's a good place to start. You can certainly add to it. And those certainly can count as your own reasons to live through the apocalypse. Uh, the final poem we'll look at is a poem by Ariana Brown, one of my absolute favorite poems by Ariana. Uh, Ariana. This one was featured in a zine called After Poems, which is certainly available right now on their website to buy as a digital copy. But this is a poem. These are just for context. These are poems that kind of think about or in the aftermath of a breakup, right? Uh, it doesn't for your own context when we're thinking about mental health doesn't necessarily have to be as we've been kind of like thinking through these past weeks about what mental health means to each of us individually in the context of whatever might be going on in our lives, right? But also thinking nationally or globally. uh, just for context, that is important, but can certainly carry through beyond that. So I'll read the poem and then share the prompt, and whichever direction you want to take the prompt or the other prompt that I shared earlier. Uh, Certainly, you can take that direction or combine all three prompts to make up something else. So this is Ariana Brown. This is There Will Be by Ariana Brown. There will be. There will be love, kisses on the cheek, a hand on your lower back, a look in the eyes saying you're wanted. There will be ease, soft breathing, and your favorite foods. A warm animal crawling into bed to sleep with you. There will be your family, your sisters, the black girls you love with ferocity. There is them and you together in safety. There is love. There will be everything you dreamed, your own peace, a life you made with others who love you and tell you and mean it and prove it. There will only be death if it is natural, if it is time. There will be no running out of time or running away or running in circles. There will be rest, a comfortable place to lay your head. There will be your body and its glorious shape, the nape of your neck, a healthy head of hair no one will want to change. There will be you looking in a mirror and smiling. There will be peace and grounding. There will be the sound of Black people laughing and eating and carrying on. And you will join them to laugh and eat and carry on and say ridiculous, beautiful things. There will be your things, your stuff that no one will take from you. There is love, enough to go around. There is your history, no longer a shadow, but a collective reason to protect this world where things will be, where freedom lives. There will be studying in groups and questions for how to move forward. There will be people taking care of each other. There will be warm weather and fruit popsicles and your cousins holding you tight. There will be life. In this world, I am telling you, I pledge to you, there will be life. There will be reasons to stay, to play, to give, to ask, to learn, to know, to grow, to dance, to try, to not have to fight. There will be someone's hand in yours. There will be. So that's a poem. Some things to kind of point out about this poem, as you might have noticed, the poem is definitely in conversations with the other poems we've looked at. You know, uh, in the same vein, it's also a list poem, right? But it's doing a lot of speculative work. This is imagining into a future where there would be, peace, right? Where there will be grounding, where there will be the sound of Black people laughing, right? In the same manner, as Nikita Gill mentions, love, peace, right? Revolution, all those things, brown eyes, right? In the same way where, Brown mentions there will only be death if it is natural, if it is time, if you recall from the Ocean Vuong poem, about the uncle not killing himself, but, dying on purpose, right? Uh, so there are certain like conversations happening. But one thing that I want us to note is to kind of take note of the speculative tone of Ariana Brown's poem and how it leaps into a future that is not yet, right? To think about what is possible in that future, um, even while thinking about life as it is right now after the aftermath, in the aftermath of this terrible thing that has happened. Uh, and I want us to take cues from that. We end the poem with reasons to stay, right? Uh, and it kind of goes on with these series of infinitives, right? To stay, to play, to give, to ask, to learn, to know, to grow, right? Uh, and using the poem, or any of the texts that we've discussed as a guide. And when I say that, I mean any of the poems or the story or the essays that we've looked at over the course of the past few weeks. What can you speculate about what the future looks like for you? And as you write, as you think about it, I want you to immerse yourself fully in that world that you've created. Think about what you smell, what you taste, what you envision, what you see, all those things. And taking a cue from KB Brookings' poem, Good Grief, that we looked at last week, where they admonish, let's write a future more joyful and less inevitable in segments of lives. Anything we dream will be better than this, right? Key words here, will be, right? Anything we dream will be. Uh, will be because it has to be, right? Uh, the way Brown mentions, there will be life, right? There will be life. There will be the life we dream will be and has to be better than this. And that would be the end. Before I leave, I want to leave you with this. If you're